Morning, everyone. It's Joe Waxman. I'm back with another mini reading. This morning, I wanted to look at Ramdas, aka Richard Alpert. He was a famous spiritual teacher in the West, active in the 60s. Yeah, so let's get started. Go to my website, macroastrology.com, if you want a reading, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. So not much of an introduction, but that's okay. Ramdas, April 6, 1931, 10:40 a.m. So just a little bit more about Ramdas. He was a psychologist, and he became famous because he was I think like a professor in Harvard, and he did these experiments with Timothy Leary, testing acid, LSD. And that was part of the whole 60s hippie movement, where, acid played an integral role, LSD. And he was one of the people that helped spark that off. This got him kicked out of Harvard, where he embarked to India and met his teacher, spiritual guru teacher, Neem Karoli Baba. And then he became Ram Das and started teaching spirituality, Eastern spirituality. He wrote several books, but his most famous book is Be Here Now. So let's get started looking at his chart. So Exalted Sun in Aries, very prominent in the chart in the 10th house, tightly conjunct Uranus and the North Node. That's really, really powerful because it's an exalted sun. So, I mean, what an exalted sun will do is give somebody a lot of integrity, in general. We have to look at other factors here, but generally an exalted sun would make that person like just a really integral type, strong spirited person. And Uranus conjunct the sun they're quite revolutionary. They're quite unique, brilliant. I mean, Uranus is the planet of genius, world thinking, meaning that they like to be aware of the whole world because that's what Uranus does. It makes you very aware. And interestingly, Uranus plays a prominent role in a lot of politicians for that reason. Whether good or bad, they're thinking about the world, whether they're, for humanity or for enslaving humanity, humanity's freedom or humanity's enslavement, either one. They're still thinking about the world. Uranus is not a benevolent planet like Jupiter is. It doesn't have humanity's best wishes. It's neutral. It's, he's a neutral planet. He doesn't talk about, wanting great things for humanity, but he's not evil either. It's just the awareness, this huge awareness. Right, I have it conjunct my ascendant. A lot of politicians or world leaders or worldview, big leader types have it conjunct their sun. Interestingly, in Gemini, Donald Trump has this combination, all three, North Node, Uranus, and Sun. It's in Gemini, but it's also in the 10th house. When Sun's in the 10th house, it makes natural leaders, right? When North Node's in the 10th house, it creates a real striving to career recognition, especially as they get older in the second half of life. So this is very prominent, very, very prominent for leadership position, right? Even if we didn't know anything about, if this was just like a blind reading, didn't know anything, I'd be like, well, this person is definitely going to get career recognition. Okay, his moon is in Sagittarius, mutable fire. Sag moons are just, I personally love them because they're just wild and free, and they have this great spirit, and they're fun to be around. They're adventurous. They're just great. They're so interesting. Me as a Gemini, you know, Gemini Sun and Venus, it's very natural to love Sag moons because they're entertaining. They entertain me. It's in the fifth house by quadrant, but sixth house by sign and approaching the sixth house cusp. I would read this as a sixth house moon. And a sixth house moon is going to be, it's not the easiest place for a moon because it brings in a lot of conflict, right? Sixth house is about conflict resolution, about daily mundane life, routine, health and sickness, small animals, stuff like that. Chop wood, carry water, hard work. It also brings in a lot of Virgo qualities of just having like this criticality, kind of managerial quality as well. But it brings in a lot of conflict, and we can see that, you know, with especially with the main thing where he, you know, got fired from Harvard for testing LSD. That's a sixth house kind of thing. It's just a conflict and resolution. But it is fairly bright. You know, he was born actually a few days after an eclipse because the nodes are eclipse points. So like, just like, I didn't look at the time, but like it's 2.5 days per sun. So like 3 days before there was an eclipse, a total lunar eclipse, a full moon lunar eclipse. He was born a few days after, right? So very, very auspicious time. Very bright moon. Yeah, and he has some squares to his moon too. And if we look at this really describes, I mean, it puts into context that, among other things, but that whole LSD thing, because here we have Neptune and an exalted Venus squaring his moon. So these are all basically feminine planets. I mean, definitely Venus and moon. Neptune, I like to think of as feminine, even though the god of Neptune is often depicted as a male. It's very feminine energy and at least neutral, but anyway. Neptune is often associated with drugs, right? So LSD. And he was also known to smoke marijuana. I mean, not that that's uncommon these days, but I mean, a lot of hippies did anyway. But, you know, he was big in that whole thing. I don't know how much he smoked, but it's irrelevant to me. I'm not making a judgment about it. It's just, that's what Neptune is known for. Neptune is also known for spirituality. So when we have this T-square here, it's a tense aspect that's bringing in his joy, his love, his romance, his relationships, all exalted in the ninth house, where he loved philosophy, religion, higher thinking, higher mindedness, and also higher education. We can also see that you know, highest level of education, where he became this high-level psychologist. And then he took it even further into spirituality, Eastern spirituality and religion and philosophy. The exalted Venus shows a very high quality. That Venus is exalted here shows that it's not just that he loves those things, but they're going to be highest quality, right? And that it's square to the moon shows that his desires, his wants, his relationships are at odds with his emotional needs, and there's some tensions there. And as well as, you know, there's some delusion in relationships. Neptune opposite Venus shows someone who's very delusional in relationships. I have this also opposite my sun. And definitely the tendency to have delusions is there. It's very real, especially in relationships. And square to the moon shows that there's going to be a disharmonious relationship between his moon, his mind, his inner, you know, emotional needs and the inner mind, and illusion, delusion, drugs, alcohol. But it's still a connection. So as these, as he ages and integrates these squares, which are and oppositions, which are hard to resolve but not unresolvable, they become easier over time as we learn and grow. That's the whole point of astrology. These are lessons. The squares and oppositions are lessons. Tense aspects, difficult positions are lessons. So we get better at them as we get older. So as he gets older, he's going to integrate these into his moon and his Venus and his Neptune. He's going to make this T squares, it's called, harmonious. So he's going to have a lot of more like compassion, spirituality, psychic qualities to his moon. The moon's the most psychic indicator in the chart. So a lot of potential for psychic and love. You know, Venus in Pisces is like divine love. You know, these are really people who know how to love from the depths of their heart. He's very compassionate, very kind and compassionate and sensitive and gentle soul. Also could potentially prophetic, like psychic, like predictive. Neptune can predict things in a way that it's not logical. It's not, Neptune's not a logical planet, but it has this ability to be able to have this predictive spiritual quality, like psychics who just, they can see the future and they don't know why. You know, Uranus is a different kind of thing as far as psychic qualities. It has the psychic element, but it's much more logical. You know, it'll be able to understand things on a much more tangible way, whereas Neptune is not really understanding, but it's just amazing psychic quality. And then Pluto, the third spiritual planet, conjunct his ascendant in Cancer, squaring his sun. That's the psychology. Pluto is the planet of psychology, of psychological awareness, of depth of perception. Pluto is the planet that will, also astrology, the psychological aspect of astrology. Uranus is the main planet of astrology, but Pluto is the psychological aspect of astrology. And Neptune is the predictive aspect of astrology. So when you ever have like all three, they can make a really good astrologer if everything else, you know, aligns with that, and that's what they want. That's their choices. So probably if he wanted to be an astrologer, that he would have been a great astrologer. However, I can see that his calling was even higher than that, because the sun, Uranus, I don't want to say higher, but it was just, he was more of a leader, and he'd probably need some 8th house things here in order to be really astrologically focused. But you know, there could be other ways. Anyway, he wasn't. But the psychology we can see here. And, you know, the psychology is interesting because it's like a psychologist is not just trying to heal you. They're also trying to, in a sense, control you, because that's what psychology does. The psychologist wants to pick apart your mind and understand you from the inside out, understanding all the, you know, components that make up your psyche. And in order to do that, they have to be above you on their level of psychological awareness. And if they're above you, they can manipulate you and control you. So that's kind of the nature of Pluto. It's going to dissect you and pull you apart and be able to dominate and control you, right? That's very Plutonic. Here he has the square, and that's pretty intense. Also with Jupiter. Jupiter plays into it. But it is an aspect. And when he was younger, that probably caused him, you know, crises. Pluto brings crises, especially intense aspect. And it transformed his body, transformed his identity. Not so much his body, but his identity, potentially his body, but his identity definitely. From Richard Alpert to Ram Das, right? Pluto transforms whatever it touches. Okay. And it, you know, in aspect to his sun, definitely made him a psychologist, but also transformed him again and gave him this great psychological ability. I would not want to get on his bad side, although extremely kind. You know, the level of awareness with North Node here, just huge personality, exalted sun, square Pluto conjunct ascendant in Cancer. This guy was powerful. I mean, talk about, I mean, not only that, opposite Saturn. Saturn's in a wide square to the sun, but it's still there. And Saturn, you know, when he was younger, controlling, you know, that Saturn is squaring his sun in a, well, it's actually separating, but still Saturn's leading. Saturn's ahead of the sun, so it's dominate. So Saturn has a limiting and inhibiting influence on his sun, so that kept him humble the first half of his life. But as he got older, he just got bigger and bolder. And Saturn is in Capricorn, so it's very strong. It's very prominent, his Saturn. And that's great for overcoming difficulties and challenges, because it just gives him such strength of will, the kind of structural will that Saturn brings, as opposed to the kind of Martian will, which is will of force. Saturn's will is will of being able to endure and to keep going on and never give up. And it's in the 7th house. I don't know about his relationships or his married life, but he probably married a little bit later, if he married at all. And he probably had a good wife, but it wasn't like Saturn, you know, Saturn is Saturn, even when it's in Capricorn or in Libra. It's not going to do tremendously positive things. What it can do is endure. So it can create an enduring relationship, a long-lasting relationship, a stable relationship. Somebody who's very hardworking and stable and Saturnian themselves. What else? So 10th house lord is Jupiter. Jupiter is exalted right behind the ascendant. So, I mean, some people say like, oh, it's in the 12th house. Yeah, I mean, technically it's in the 12th house, but it's so close to the ascendant and it's in the same sign, is definitely having influence on the ascendant. So what the 12th house here is bringing, this is like almost like a, it has like a dimmed influence, you could say that, because of the 12th house influence. So it's slightly more spiritual. It's exalted in Cancer, very high quality Jupiter, very high quality teaching ability. Jupiter is the teacher, Jupiter is the guru, Jupiter is the great benefic, brings great luck to him and protects him always. Gives him great spiritual understanding because it has that 12th house connection, but still that first house connection makes him a natural teacher, right? So you have to read 2 house influences. That's just appropriate, and it's not just me who thinks that. I've you know, other astrologers who've been doing this a long time like to see things in multiple ways, because it's the only way you're going to get, you know, black and white. A black and white rigid dogmatic view doesn't really help. We need a nuanced view in astrology, because these things are nuanced, they're shades, right? And so this has 12th house influence, but also has first house influence. And great Jupiter. So, I mean, look how many planets he has that are exalted. Sun, Venus, Jupiter, and then Saturn's in domicile, in his own sign. That's very, very strong, very strong. So let's see. He was a natural teacher, natural leader. Mercury is very high in the sky. It's conjuncting the 11th house cusp, so he's able to speak in large groups, to like spiritual groups, right? 11th house lord is in the 9th house, so that's his religious groups, spiritual groups. He's speaking, he's communicating, right? The 10th house, even though there's not a rule, it doesn't rule a house. The 10th house cusp is in the Pisces sign, 9th and 10th. So career and spirituality or higher education knowledge are one and the same thing. And he made his career out of education, which is this Pisces, psychology, and then later religion. or spirituality. Pisces is bringing in 12th house influence. So it's the religious spirituality. It's both, combining those two influences. And that was his career. So it's still sticking with the theme, but the predominant 10th house sign is Aries, and that's also going in his first house in Leo. So bringing in more influence to his self, his career, his 10th house, that's drawing in influence to himself. He himself became very prominent. Ramdas, like we know, like he's a prominent figure, not just his career, his ability to speak, but he himself. He became famous, right, as a personality, not just what he did. More than what he did, more than his books, he is famous, right? He is well known, right? So what else? Sun is ruling the second house cusp, so knowledge, teaching. Again, second house is knowledge, wealth. He made wealth by being a public figure. He could teach because second house is knowledge, assets. What else can we say about these things? Mercury is ruling his 12th house, as well as his 3rd and 4th house. So he's bringing in his roots and his spirituality into his community. So 12th house influence here, right? And then that's going into the 9th house. So he's mixing all these influences. And then the nodes. When he was young, South Node in the 4th house in Libra, Expositor is in the 9th house in Pisces, right? So when he was young, he was very wanting to go into higher education, right? And then he did that, and he got his degrees and all that. South Node describes early life, early childhood influences, and this is 4th house is also early childhood and roots. And so like this is more about, the 4th house is more about home and roots and sticking to tradition, but also like building. If you're trying to like build it can be like real estate or land, or like even building an empire. So like a lot of times you'll see like people who are big into building things that last. You see them with 4th house influence. So he's more into building, gathering knowledge, building up his life with higher education. And the Pisces here, because it's water signs, it's connecting to psychology, because Jupiter, it's conjuncting with Pluto, all that. We already talked about that. But then as he got older, he was thrust into public life. North Node and Aries in the 10th house just craves public recognition. Because North Node is that thing that's just endlessly hungry, and it can never be satisfied. So it just wants and wants and wants. It eats and eats and eats, and it's never satisfied. In Vedic lore, North Node or Rahu was that head without a body. So it could eat and eat, but it never got full. And K2 was the body without a head. And so they complete each other. K2 is dumb, but full and satisfied and detached. So he became detached from his roots with South Node here. Detached from his upbringing, detached from his early culture, whatever his background was, and he became, Ramdas, something completely different, something completely new, plus the square Pluto on his ascendant, squaring his sun and nodes. And North Node conjunct Uranus. Uranus is the planet of awakening. I mean, he was into a spiritual awakening and like wide open awareness. Right? Be here now. That's Uranus, right? Uranus wants to be here now more than any other planet. And conjunct the sun also gave him tremendous ego. So he was able to take like the world stage and just without any problems and just soak it all up and just be like, look, I'm Ramdas. I'm here to be your guru. He wanted to be everyone's guru, or at least he was open to that. He had that energy, even without trying. That was just there. Him on the world stage, being bigger than life. So I think that's pretty much the bulk of it. This incredibly strong Saturn enabled him to overcome any difficulties, endure no matter what, even though he suffered a stroke at some point. Moon in the sixth house, health and disease, right? Even though it's dispositor's Jupiter exalted, the first house, it's still, you know, still got these squares. So the moon relates to the mind, and the stroke has to do with the mind. So you know, that's definitely a possibility in life. Also, we look at squares to the nodes, which the node, like squares to the nodes are pretty much Jupiter, ascendant, and Pluto. Squares to the nodes indicate some kind of destiny relating to the planets involved, because nodes deal with destiny, right? This is your future destiny, this is your past history, and the squares to nodes indicate like periods of time in your life. So Jupiter and Pluto, like powerful, you know, teacher, psychology. Jupiter's exalted here, so guru. He became a guru. He was destined. Also ascendant usually can often point to some sort of destiny for a person. So he had this destiny. It's very prominent here. What else? Chiron here would indicate that he was, because he was such high quality person, like so many wonderful qualities, we can say that there's no bad aspects to Chiron. This was a higher quality Chiron, therefore it's like the shaman, the healer. You know, we can already say this was a positive, a benefic, higher evolution Chiron. He was a healer in groups and communities. He healed his community. That's what Chiron represents in its higher elevation. Healer, shaman, wise man, that type of thing. Teacher, right? Another indication. And I think that's it. One other thing, third house often indicates the intellectual mind. So Neptune here would definitely bring in psychic capabilities. And I don't know anything about Ramdas as far as being psychic, but I imagine he was. I could bet on it that he was psychic to some extent, especially with Neptune, Moon connection, Pluto, Sun, Uranus. Sun is less of a psychic planet. It can still bring psychic qualities. Moon is the main one, and Moon Neptune can be very psychic. All right, I think that's it. I'm trying to do one of these every day. So yeah, don't forget, if you like this, like, subscribe, share. If you want a reading, I offer 2 different readings. I offer a mini reading, which is similar to this. But you get to ask questions, and so therefore it can take a little bit longer. And a full reading where I research every aspect, make sure I have like a really good understanding of your whole chart, and you can ask tons of questions and whatnot. And that usually lasts over an hour, and it's well worth the money. So go to my website, macroastrology.com, check it out. All right, thanks guys. Bye.